Hello and welcome to 11FS Spotlight. I'm Gwera Kiwana, and in this weekly show, we shine a spotlight on the best and brightest in the world of financial services. So we try to understand what gets them going, growing, and what they think the future of the industry will look like. So on today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by pub quiz connoisseur Jon Prideaux, and the CEO at Boku. How are you doing today, Jon?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Gwera.
Really good to have you on. So on today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about Jon's career and take a deep dive into the world of mobile wallets. Are they taking over? Let's see. So we'll start off. If you could give me a 1-minute elevator pitch of what Boku, what is Boku? Who is Boku?
I suppose we're sort of evolving to being a slightly different company. Our history was we set up a global payment networks, allowing people to buy stuff and charge it through to their phone bill. And then we kind of figured out that the skills that we had to do that enabled us to not just connect people who wanted to pay and charge it to their phone bill. It also enabled us to bring together all the new payment methods evolving or emerging to look after this new emerging middle class. So right across Asia, Middle East and Africa and Latin America, you have these mobile wallets and real-time banking systems emerging. And we've put together this network we call MIST, which reaches about over 5 billion people, 5 billion accounts, I should say, rather than people, essentially comprised of mobile wallets, direct carrier billing, and real-time payments.
Sorry, can you say that number again, please?
Yeah, we have about 5.7 billion accounts that we can reach through the connections we've got just now. It's a stunning number. It's obviously a bit less in terms of the number of people because people have different accounts, might have a phone number and a mobile wallet and maybe have a bank account as well. So there could be some triplication in there as well. But, we see our job as being trying to bring these new consumers who basically don't have cards or don't want to pay with cards, springing up in the new middle class that's sort of arisen in the last 10, 15 years or so. And, if people want to reach them, you have to go with the way in which they want to pay. And that may well not be, you can't just go around the world thinking you can just have a bit of Visa, a bit of MasterCard, or if you're lucky, you'll chuck in some PayPal and all of a sudden you're fine. The world's not like that anymore. And we aim to serve those new emerging consumers, the mobile first consumers, if you like. People who came to the internet on their mobile device first tend not to have cards, and we tend to be the best way of reaching them.
That's really impressive. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into that throughout the course of this interview. But I'm curious to learn a little bit more about you. You have such an interesting journey, and you've been at IBM, you've been at Visa, secure trading, shop creator. Oh my goodness! Like it's a pretty hefty list. Can you just give us the highlights of your career that led you to Boku?
So it's basically I'm just a failed lawyer in the sense that my dad was a lawyer and I wanted to be a lawyer. And right up to the moment that I went up to university and figured out what being a lawyer actually meant. So I had a massive sort of epiphany in the induction for the law course where they asked me a dumb question and I realized I didn't want to be studying those questions the rest of my life. And I wanted to work with computers, which took me to IBM. And I guess whilst I was at IBM, I started working with what was then a pretty small company, maybe sort of 20, 30 people. A startup, you could say, not a startup in a garage, a startup in a posh office in Kensington. But that turned out to be Visa Europe. And I sort of started to work with Visa Europe back in the late 1980s. And I stayed there through about 2006. And I guess when I started, it was pretty small. But by the time I finished, it was pretty big. And I'd been a senior executive looking after most of Visa's product development at that time. And then, things moved on. I tried a few startups before the whole secure trading thing. I had an attempt to set up a debit card scheme. I think you learn more from your failures than from your successes. That was one that didn't go the way I wanted. Secure trading was a PSP. Another one would then be sort of moving into shop creator, where it seemed like a great idea to buy an e-commerce or buy into an e-commerce platform company. But it turned out that was quite competitive, didn't work out the way I was. And I was involved with various other projects, and one of which rolled up to become a Boku. So I started Was involved with Boku before it was founded, but didn't come onto the management team until I'd exited Shop Creator, and that was about 2012. And I've been the CEO there since about 2014. Wow,
so you were a member of the Boku family from the beginning, really, which is exciting because of the role that you're in right now has led you to you're now the CEO at Boku. Let's dive into some questions about Boku specifically. So, Boku has you'll have three offices, one in London, one in California, and one in Estonia. Can you tell me a little bit more about why the decision you made for those cities to be where you have a physical presence, and maybe if you could, go ahead.
Gwera, we have way more than three offices. I mean, those are maybe the big ones. I mean, Boku is a kind of, we were sort of semi-remote, as it were, before the world sort of figured out this was a great way to work. And in fact, right from the start, we've had a management team that's been split between San Francisco and London. And as we've expanded, we've really put people into lots of different countries. So we have substantial operations in California, in London, in Munich, and also Dusseldorf. We have a big office in Mumbai. We also have people in Beijing, in Tokyo, in Paris, in Sao Paulo, a couple of offices in Estonia that just arose from an acquisition that we did. And some of those offices have been there because we acquired companies and expanded from there. Some of them just because that's where the people wanted to work from, and some because that's where the customers were. But genuinely, as an organization, I think we've sort of got to get away from saying you plonk down people in particular places. I mean, our customers are global. We operate in 90 countries. And so our customers expect us to be all around the world. And, I wish I could sort of bottle it to see, exactly how we did it, because we've been able to build an organization of, 300 or 400 people, but with a sort of a global culture so that everybody knows how to work. And you can have different people in different countries reporting to each other, or people on 3 continents cooperating on a project, maybe for a customer who might be in a 4th continent. And that's pretty much how Boku would tend to work. We're pretty location agnostic when it comes to most of our people.
It's great. So truly remote from the beginning, it seems. And so if you were
remote and not, but basically people working where they want, I suppose, is the most important thing. A Boku question is, are you in tomorrow? And that was what it was like before the pandemic was around. I mean, we reckon we should hire decent people who can make good decisions, and exactly where they're going to work from should be one of the least complicated.
That's great. It's great you mentioned the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, mentioning the pandemic as something that didn't really change your way of working, but it seems to have changed the way that the people have the uptake of digital wallets. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen in terms of the growth of digital wallets around the world, and what you're most excited about?
I think I'm most excited about the size of the opportunity. And as I said, perhaps a couple of minutes ago, I mean, the starting point on this is that the people who are consuming stuff or buying things over the internet has really changed. And if you really sort of boiled it down to its fundamentals, the startling fact is that the world's middle class has essentially doubled in size since 2008. It used to be about sort of 1.8 billion people. Now it's about 3.5 billion people. And those new people have emerged in Asia, in China, in India, but in many other countries in Asia as well. They're emerging in Africa. I mean, I'm sure you see them all around you, in Nigeria. They've emerged in the Middle East. They've emerged in Latin America. And, somehow the sort of way in which the credit card works is an artifact of technology that was around from the 1950s or so. You mentioned that one of my first jobs was at IBM. Actually, do you know that the 80-character limit on the Magstripe, now about to be retired by MasterCard, was limited by the size of a punch card from IBM? Wow. So if you were kind of inventing a mobile payment system or a payment system for the middle class today, you probably wouldn't go back to the limitations of a punch card designed in the 1950s. And that's exactly what happened with mobile wallets. And I would say it's not really the pandemic that's driven it. It's maybe accelerated a bit of e-commerce. But what's really happened is that new payment methods emerge in relation to sort of new ways of doing trade and new new patterns of trade. And just inventing something that was based around a piece of plastic was never going to be the way they go. It's going to be based around that mobile phone. It's location aware. It's always online. It's got a camera. It's manifestly more convenient. I spoke to one of our people in China the other day, and it's almost incomprehensible to her that anybody would think about pulling out a piece of plastic and using it to buy something, because it's so obviously just sort of antediluvian in terms of the way it should work. It's clearly not taking advantage of the products that people have. And this has led to an explosion in usage. You mentioned how it's changed, and it's not just, as I say, pandemic-wise, but I think it was 2020 that we crossed an important barrier, so that about 50% now of the world's e-commerce takes place and is charged to mobile wallets. Now, a big chunk of that's obviously coming from China, but even so, wallets are the most popular way of buying things online globally now. And that just really reflects the growth that we've seen in the spending power of that new middle class.
Yeah, that's really cool, and the spending power of the middle class is something that is a bit of a hot topic around the world, because middle classes look different in different places. For example, you mentioned, you talked about how I have experienced mobile wallets. I'm in Kenya, and I don't use cash. Not many people take cash. I pay my rent via my phone. I just bought a coffee earlier today with my phone. It's ubiquitous here. But I just want to talk about the report that Boku released recently, about mobile wallets, and one thing I'd like to dig into a little bit more is they talk about the difference between card-based mobile wallets versus stored value mobile wallets. Can you explain the difference between these two, and which one is growing faster?
I guess the latter. I think that effectively the card-based mobile wallets would be an attempt, if you like, to put the same type of technology in the hands of Westerners as are already in the sort of emerging middle class, which are big, if you like, mobile native wallets, where you might be topping them up or linking them to your bank account. So something like Apple Pay or Google Pay, the basic idiom is that you're sticking a card into your wallet, and then the wrapper that Apple or Google gives you means that the transaction experience is a bit more convenient. And it's about the closest that people will get in the West to sort of understanding what a true mobile wallet experience is like. And then if you go to something like Alipay or PayPay in Japan, or sort of Paytm in India, sometimes it will involve loading some funds into the wallet so you can pay for it, much the same way that people, were putting money into, say, a Revolut card to top it up to be able to make spending from there. And sometimes you can just link so that anytime you do a transaction, if you don't have sufficient funds available, then an automatic top up will come from your bank account. So those are really the two things, the bifurcation that's taken place in wallets between sticking a wrapper around what's essentially a card-based infrastructure and then going in with a truly sort of native infrastructure, which would be what most of the world's wallets were.
Right. So I guess in a sense, in the global south versus the global north, there's a bit of an unbanking or uncarding of the underbanked. Which would you say is the fastest growing market right now for mobile wallets?
I suppose I wouldn't say this was so much sort of south versus north as well, just in the first instance. I think it's right. It comes sort of in a swoop from the sort of bottom left of the map in Latin America, through Africa, but up into Asia as well. And so you've got quite a number of sort of northern hemisphere countries that would meet the same type of criteria. And clearly most people live in Asia. Mm-hmm. And so to a large extent, most of the action is taking place in Asia, not just in China, but also in countries like, developed markets within East Asia, like Japan and Taiwan and South Korea, emerging countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, India itself, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So all of these countries have got their wallet infrastructures. You mentioned, and I think I might have said that you were in Nairobi or Kenya, so apologies, Nairobi in Nigeria. I now understand, obviously, that you're in the home of M-Pesa. So clearly, probably the granddaddy of a lot of these sort of mobile payments was taking place very much in Kenya from the start through Safaricom. And, clearly Africa is a place where there's a heck of a lot of action on the mobile wallet front as well, and where these type of devices have moved from being things to just do person-to-person payments and are evolving, as you say, into proper payment mechanisms that allow you to buy coffees and the rest. I mean, what we're seeing is just faster growth in spending from these new economies, if you like, compared to the older economies of the West, of sort of Europe and North America. Middle class spending there isn't really growing by very much, and middle class spending just across the piece in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I mean, according to some statistics that I sort of saw on the internet, so I'm sure they're entirely reliable, but the general sense is that it's maybe 5 or 6 times as fast, the growth in spending in these newer emerging economies as opposed to what was happening with the middle class spending in the West.
Yeah, so let's talk about the growth of spending in these economies. So like Latin America and Asia, it's booming, right? It's explosive, and a big role, if correct me if definitely push back here if you think I'm wrong here, but I think a big role in that has been the rise of super apps in Latin America and also in Asia. Can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of work that you do with super apps or super platforms like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point because I mentioned earlier that sort of new payment methods emerge, as new ways of trading emerge. I mean, the one is you're never going to invent a sort of a genuinely global new payment mechanism without a changing pattern of trade of some sort. And what the super apps are doing is just changing the conception of what you stick into a payment. So you could be bundling together payment as an enabler for, a ride-sharing app, or a marketplace, which is what happened with Alipay, or a messaging app, which is what happened with WeChat Pay. And so, the idea of these super apps is that you start up your phone, you go into the super app, and you never have to leave it, whether you want to sort of book a taxi ride, whether you want to book a massage, whether you want to buy something from a marketplace, whether you want to send a message to your friends, you're always living within the app. And payment is such a critical lubricant to all of the commerce that takes place within a super app, that they now have evolved to have a life of their own and can be general purpose payment mechanisms. And to be honest, I mean, the opportunity for someone like Boku is to somehow tap in and to make international merchants available to these domestic ecosystems. And they've kind of built up, in China, Alipay and WeChat Pay are huge, servicing Chinese merchants for Chinese people. But the opportunity arises in bringing international merchants and giving Chinese people the chance to buy from foreign merchants. And ditto, Indonesian wallets are looking to try to connect to, the global brands of the type that Boku works with. Because we've, just to give you a sense, as a company, we work with pretty much all of the large digital entertainment brands. So like Apple and Sony and Spotify and Microsoft and Netflix and Google, all of those are customers of ours, taking various of our payment methods, mostly the direct carrier billing, but increasingly with mobile wallets and some of these real-time payment mechanisms too. So we're finding that those relationships we have with international merchants are really attractive to these wallets because their customers want to buy the international brands. And to a large measure, if they're digital, we've got them. Absolutely.
I remember a time when, friends of mine in Kenya and Uganda and other parts of Africa would have to use a friend's address in the UK to access Netflix or to access a Spotify account. But now, you can pay for Spotify with M-Pesa in Kenya, which is really exciting and definitely a change from what it used to be a few years ago. But let's dive into a little bit more B2B with your the clients that you work with, your partners. So a lot of the work, it seems, is you provide embedded finance services for your clients and their customers as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the products that you and solutions Boku provides?
Yeah, so our customers are other businesses. So you're exactly right. I mean, we don't have individuals as customers of ours. The person we serve is the global merchant, like a Netflix or a Spotify. And our job in life is to make it easy for them to recruit new customers, and precisely the way that you describe. The more payment methods you make available to the big companies, then the more it sort of democratizes access to those services, and people can pay the way they want to, rather than having to be stuck, as I say, in this old idiom of Visa and MasterCard. So we spend a huge amount of effort on trying to remove friction from the sign-up process, to make it easy, cheap if you like, to acquire new customers. And the second thing we do is we try to make it easy to stay subscribed to some of these services, to try to help improve the lifetime value. I mean, a lot of payment methods exist in an idiom where they're sort of one transaction after another. You make a payment and then you're done. And then when you go back to make another payment, you need to try to go and select the payment method every time. And what we try to do is come up with a simple way to do subscriptions so that we're exposed to the lifetime value of those customers, but also we make it easy for our customers, our merchants, to have longer lifetimes and to have happier customers over a longer period. That's basically our job.
That's exciting. I imagine there might be some clients your salespeople are calling, and there's might be a bit of an education piece or a bit of struggle to explain the value of mobile wallets. Can you tell me like some of the struggles and the chasm, the technical handholding you need to do with prospective clients when introducing them to Boku?
As I say, so Boku supports about 330 or different payment mechanisms in about 90 countries, and most of those are sort of phone companies. So we allow people to buy stuff and charge it directly to their phone bill. And that's a pretty easy concept to explain. The mobile wallets are relatively newer for us, but as you can see, they're huge. And effectively, if a company is trying to sell their products or services globally, it's relatively easy to be able to point to the stats. One of the stats I saw recently was that in China, for example, I think it's something like 12% of e-commerce sales are on cards, 78% are on mobile wallets. So you just say to the guy, look, are you prepared to leave 78% of your potential customers without the way that they want to pay? It tends to be a relatively short conversation then about the need for accessing these areas. Perhaps for merchants, it's about, do they want to go into that market? Do they want to sort of customize the offer? But once you've made the decision to go into Indonesia or Kenya or what have you, then being able to support the payment methods that the people in that country want to pay with is a bit of a no-brainer.
Supporting, meeting the customer where they're at, basically, right? So supporting them with whatever it is they want to pay. With this shift, I guess not shift, more so rise of crypto. Sorry, it's not a fintech show unless we talk about crypto. How do you feel about the rise in crypto wallets and versus fiat wallets? You're currently working in the fiat space. So using currencies that are, from central banks. But are there plans? Are you excited about crypto? Are you skeptical? Or does Boku have plans really at all to explore and wade into that space?
So I think the first thing to say is that my personal opinion. I'll give it to you in a bit, but I'll say that my personal opinion is probably neither here nor there. We like to look at the evidence. What is it that people want to buy? What is it that our merchants want to sell? And how do they want to pay for it? And so we look at the actual payment patterns. I mean, we're in the business of integrating together the payment methods that people are actually using to support sort of goods and services. And right now, crypto in that is nowhere. I mean, consumers are not using or demanding to use crypto for anything. If anything, people who are really, really passionate about crypto are hodlers. I mean, they're holding on for dear life. They never want to sell a damn one. And so to give that away to buy a cup of coffee is to risk that will be the $10,000 cup of coffee in a few years from now. So there's very little evidence that people are actually using crypto to want to actually buy things as a payment mechanism. And so, as and when it does, we will incorporate it. Whether it ever will is open to debate. I mean, if you think about the sort of payment problems that people have, I talked earlier about making it easy to acquire new customers, making it easy to have repeat transactions. And crypto isn't really well suited to solving the type of problems like that. It isn't a great tool when it comes to facilitating mobile. Can you make it into a one-tap transaction? Can you make it into a transaction which can then support a subscription for the way that people want to live? And certainly the cryptographic currencies that have come up to date don't necessarily make that very useful. So when the demand's there, we will definitely follow it. But we're not people who are sort of doing it, as it were, for its own sake. And as at right now, there doesn't appear to be a huge amount of evidence of people wanting to use it. So we'll carry on integrating wallets that are booming, and we'll leave crypto to accumulate value or not in the wallets, because it's more, I think, an investment question than it is a payment system at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of hype in the crypto market right now, and also especially in the crypto service provider space. And we're yet to see the dust settle there. So do you feel like mobile wallets are missing anything, and how could they be improved, really?
Well, if there's one thing that mobile wallets are missing, it is typically access to all the merchants that people want to buy from. I mean, it sounds a bit self-serving for me to say this, but I think it's actually true, is that successful mobile wallets have raised huge amounts of venture capital precisely because they're able to satisfy their domestic needs. And so you have lots of little islands taking place where you might have a couple of mobile wallets in China, 4 or 5 in Indonesia, half a dozen, maybe even a dozen, depending on how you count them, in sort of Nigeria. So you have lots of these things springing up, and mostly they're serving the domestic market. I mean, what the wallet, when you think about what the consumer wants, they want to be able to buy products from anywhere in the world, the brands that they know and love, that they've seen, just like the example you gave of your friends having to sort of spoof an address in the UK in order to be able to subscribe to Spotify. It's because that's the service that's in demand. And, that's one of the missing ingredients. And whether that'll be missing for long, I don't know. And then obviously it depends a bit on the strategy of the mobile wallet, because they tend to be, a component of a super app. And so there are many, many things that you can buy with the mobile wallets. And, typically all the domestic needs are pretty well serviced. And it's the international side, which is where we can add some value, and where the wallets are sort of missing something at the moment, something they can't really fix for themselves. They need to team up with somebody like Boku, who has relationships with global merchants, to help them out.
That's really cool. All right, so as we're coming to the end, unfortunately, to the end of the show, I feel like we could keep going on and on about payments and wallets. I just want to finish off by asking you one last question. This doesn't have to be fintech related as well, but you talked earlier about your experience and the journey that's led you to Boku, and your successes, your failures. Definitely someone with a wealth of experience. What is your advice to your younger self, or to someone who's trying to get into fintech or early in their careers right now?
Well, you better love it. I mean, it's a weird thing, but for me, at any rate, sort of payments got under my skin in the late 1980s, and I mean, it sounds strange to say, but I love it. And I think that if you want to be successful in something, you shouldn't just be attracted by the hype or the riches of it all. You have to genuinely be enthusiastic about it. You have to genuinely be fascinated by some of the differences that it makes. And I've found this to be, an industry which is just endlessly reinventing itself. I mean, genuinely, when I first started in this business, people were worrying about sort of zip-zap machines and sending in authorizations by telex. And can you imagine just how much change that I've been able to see? Chip cards, contactless, mobile wallets, et cetera. So it's been a blizzard of change, because commerce is always changing. And if you're passionate about the actual subject, everything else follows from there. That would be the main piece of advice I would. I'm not sure it's necessarily advice to my younger self, but a reflection back as to things that have made me, if I have been able to sort of get to some decent positions, it's been my enthusiasm and my willingness to embrace change that has really, made that happen. That's
really great. Yeah, I mean, and keep the hunger up. Keep it, keep the enthusiasm and curiosity going. Definitely, it's been exciting to talk to you, and also excited to see what you do next in your career. But also, before we finish off, what's next for Boku?
Well, I think it's about rolling out quite a lot of this stuff. I mean, I think that as a company now, we process something in the region of about $8.5 billion worth of payments, and I guess I definitely see that as being the start. I mean, we have the opportunity now. We get out of being, essentially something that was looking after a relatively specialized sort of niche in payment. We've expanded now to what's, the world's largest e-com payment mechanism. And I just want to get more of it. I mean, for us, $8.5 billion worth of payments at a run rate is just a fraction of where it could be. And, in my wildest dreams, I reflect back on the fact that I've sort of somehow seen this rodeo a bit before. I mean, having been part of the team that was able to grow Visa from not a lot when I started in the late 1980s to quite a lot by the time I finished in the early sort of noughties. I think we have the same opportunity to do the same here, to build a pretty significant sort of payment mechanism that's really going to have an impact. And we have recruited many of the world's largest brands to be customers of ours, and we probably don't do enough for them. I mean, we're looking to sell them more products and more of these wallets. I mean, I really do see a system where we can get a heck of a lot bigger. And that's, I guess, what sort of gets me up in the morning and keeps me enthusiastic.
That's awesome. There goes the hunger and the tenacity. I think, at 11FS, we like to say, fintech is 1% done. So payments and digital wallets are only 1% done as well. So can't wait to see the future of that.
I guess we were about to wrap up, but just one other thing to say is I do think that the other thing is about resilience, because innovation, particularly in payments, because it's so much about getting critical mass, and it's really hard to obtain. And so, most things, I mean, you just take my career, the failed attempt, the debit card scheme, the not very good stuff around the whole secure trading. I learned a lot from that whole process, for sure. You've got to keep your spirits. You've got to be resilient. And there's something about, my career, if I'm looking back, I would describe it as one of sort of almost unblemished failure. And it's the blemishes on that record of failure that have lasted a long time and somehow sustained me, because it's really hard to do something that's going to work at scale in payments. And so to people, you've just got to be resilient. You've got to keep going. You've got to be enthusiastic, because it's not easy to succeed. I mean, what you get to see are the successes, because it's a kind of survivor bias. But what's getting there is not simple at all. It's really not.
Absolutely. Just the success is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Right.
So thank you. So thanks, Jon, for joining me. Where can people find out more about you and everything you're getting up to?
Well, Boku.com, Boku Pay by Mobile on Twitter. My personal Twitter is @Jon Prideaux. And apart from that, well, I'm sure you'll be able to find me.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. That's all the time we have for this week. Make sure you follow 11FS on LinkedIn so you never miss an episode, and go visit our YouTube channel at 11FS, where you can catch up on previous episodes. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Goodbye.